We'd like to welcome you to our AMA with the Gradian team. We, the Algo Gaming Guild, are honored to be the hosts, and we are excited to welcome Brandon from the Gradian team. How's it going, Brandon?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
I think let's just start off if you can just introduce yourself a little bit and then just give like a little bit of background into Gradian before we discuss it in more detail.
Yeah, sure. So my background is primarily in marketing, business strategy, and talent attraction. I joined Gradian to sort of put together the structure of the business and ensure that we weren't just another coin and that we actually provided some value, utility, and that we operated as a business that would actually generate a revenue and a profit. So we didn't have to rely on the coin's change in value to continue to operate and to continue to put our efforts into it. But I'll let Altaro tell you a little bit more about Gradian, the idea, and how it came to be.
Okay, that sounds great. And then Altaro, if you can also just introduce yourself, just give a bit of background about yourself and then just talk a little bit about Gradian.
Sorry about that. My training is in computer science, so I did computer science at university, and from there I worked in the workforce as a software engineer for a number of years. And then I worked in industry for a bit, and I've worked at companies like Wargaming, Medici in Australia, and the likes of these companies. And then more recently, I was actually doing a PhD at Melbourne University in artificial intelligence. I won't go into detail about the topic, and that's where I started working on Gradian at the start of this year in a part-time capacity. And more recently, I've changed my direction, and I'm now focusing more on Gradian, and I've kind of quit my PhD to pursue Gradian full time, and that's kind of it. And I've learned a lot during the process, particularly about the apps and writing Teal, and yeah, that's kind of it. That's a bit about myself.
Yeah, that's super helpful background. And yeah, I know I know a little bit about AI, and we can probably do a whole 1 hour space on it. But okay, so let's get a little bit more into the project and how it came about. So whoever's best to speak about this, if you just talk about how the idea started or how the company came together, and then maybe after that, just a little bit about why you guys chose Algorand as the blockchain of choice versus any other chain.
Okay, so in essence, Gradian is developing an ecosystem of dApps and creating an SDK to interface with these dApps, which enables developers to effortlessly add gamified transactions into their games. And we intend to make the front end open source, and its only purpose really is just to sign transactions that is sent to it by a backend. And our backend is what interacts with all the smart contracts. So at the moment, we've written a lootbox smart contract, and we've got a number that are a work in progress at the moment. And it's to create these dApps, developers just need to go to our dashboard where they can create a dApp client, which allows them to configure the dApp, specifying its parameters needed for its creation, like the fees and the timings of the dApp, and loading it with assets. And it's also where they can collect their fees that are generated by our dApps. And this will be like a dashboard, and each client has a client ID and secret, which identifies their instance. And it just makes adding decentralized transactions to your games very simple, and it lowers the barrier to entry because it can be quite difficult to write secure, reliable dApps and there's quite a steep learning curve, particularly with teal, that you have to get over, and we're just removing that learning curve and making it very accessible for people that may not be so keen on learning it themselves.
I think it's important to identify that it's a very different skill set that's required to actually develop a game than to actually put together these smart contracts and to scale these platforms and these games. It's really simple in this day and age with all of the game engines and the plugins that are available to just throw a game together really quickly that's really fun. But there's a lack of ability for developers to make those games Web3 enabled and to integrate crypto into those games, which is why there's a thorough lack of fun, engaging titles in the Web3 space. Most of the titles that exist are fairly boring because the people who know how to make Web3 titles don't know how to make fun games. So we want to bridge that gap and bring the ability for anyone to make fun, interactive titles utilizing crypto and the security and decentralization of Web3 platforms.
I think that's a great description. So basically, you guys are just making things a lot easier for anyone who is, I guess, developing what would be a Web 2 game, but being able to port it over to Web 3 and get the benefits of blockchain, associated with. I think that sounds great and a great description. So just a question about that in general, because I know, so you guys obviously helping people do that, but you guys have based your project on Algorand as a blockchain. Why specifically Algorand?
There's a few reasons why Algorand is the obvious choice. One is speed of transactions. With the sheer volume that we anticipate, with the number of titles that we expect to be developed, a slower, more mainstream blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum simply doesn't work. For security, some of the other smaller blockchain platforms are less stress tested and don't have the same security or clawback features, and they just haven't been used as much as the Algorand blockchain. Algorand has a strong community and originated in Australia from an Australian Melbourne university. So it's close to us and close to our project. That's just a few of the reasons. Do you want to add anything there, Altaro?
Exactly what you said. Yeah, I agree.
Great, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, we recognize obviously the benefits of Algorand, which is why we based our whole business on that. So we get it. We had a question now from Mitch from Overseas in our Discord, which kind of goes into the point that we're talking about now. Just basically asked, why do transactions have to go to your back end? Why couldn't a game send transactions directly to your smart contract? Because going to your back end first sort of feels like a point of centralization and a single point of failure.
Okay, so that's a good question, and that's for a number of reasons. So often there's things that the server has to do which you can't reveal to the front end. For example, generating random numbers that the user can't see. Otherwise, that would make the random asset generation predictable and deterministic, and that could be exploited by the user. So if we talk about the lootbox smart contract that we've just written and we're going to demo soon, that actually combines two random sources. There's a random source that's coming from the server, which isn't seen by the user, and that's combined with a random source from the user from the front end. And we create, this is in a group transaction. So one of the transactions provides a server-signed random source, and the other is provided by the front end. And so, and in the smart contract, these get combined together, which ensures the random number is actually random and it's not just a deterministic number that's been chosen by the user. So this explains why we need to do a lot of the stuff in the back end instead of the front end. If you're concerned about security, there's nothing to be concerned about, because we don't actually send the signed transactions from the back end. We actually send unsigned transactions with server-signed transactions to the front end as a group transaction, where they then get signed by your Wallet Connect and submitted to the blockchain for evaluation. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So basically, all I'm saying is we need to have the server add various transactions to the group, and then this gets sent together with unsigned user transactions that the user then signs and then sends from their front end to Algo end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I know Mitch did have a follow-up question where he just said, doesn't VRF solve that? Which, like, I get what he means, but I don't know if you guys want to answer that on or we can take that off the AMA and we can move on with the rest of the questions.
I think we can just leave it at that. There's also
Yeah.
there's also more to it. There's also would like to actually let's just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, that works. That's fine. We can answer that afterwards. You can see Mitch has asked the question in our Discord, so you guys can answer it there and chat about it. Okay, so I think let's just talk a little bit about some of the dApps that you guys have, and you've spoken a little bit about, but just to because some of them are interesting, just to talk a bit more about them. So I know the timed loot boxes. So for anyone who's not sure, can you just talk a little bit about what a timed loot box is and why they're important to like the gaming world?
Okay, so timed loot box was kind of invented by Epic Games to overcome regulatory issues with a conventional loot box. Because actually, a loot box, if you think about it, is really just a chance-based game, which is illegal if the asset is exchangeable for money, which in the case of NFTs, they are. So we need to be very careful about that sort of thing. So we don't want to be labeled as an online gambling provider, because that's going to cause all sorts of legal issues for us. So what we've done is we've copied Fortnite and created what's called a timed loot box. So all this is a loot box, but the result that is generated once you pay is going to change every X hours. And every X hours, the NFT that you can claim is going to rotate out to another NFT. So if you give it sufficient time, you're going to see all NFTs enumerated. And so it becomes more of a farm where you can see these NFTs that you can sort of claim. And once you claim it, that ends the transaction, and you have to go and buy another. So it's now not a chance-based game, because if you think about it, it's actually a skills-based game where they have to it's kind of obvious. Like, you have to choose the NFT that you want, and you can typically see all NFTs. So there's no element of unknowing and chance, and it's all deterministic. If you wait long enough, you'll see the NFT that you want. But the thing is, the game developer can tune the time between rotations so they're really long, making it kind of impractical to even wait around for all the NFTs to enumerate. So then really it's more like a conventional loot box if you make the rotation time really high. And all of this can be configured in our admin dashboard. So you just head over to our admin dashboard, create a timed loot box there, throw in the parameters that you want, like the timings, the rotation timings, the assets you want it to display, and then hit create. And then that's kind of it. Then you head to your front end, it's all connected to your client, and from there you can just use it. There's no need to spend like a week or two trying to make this teal work, which is very hard to do, to make it very reliable and to audit it as well. That's quite difficult. Yeah.
And anyone who's familiar with the Algo title, we've almost got a working prototype for this, and we plan to have this launched first with Algo.
That was actually that was actually my next question, because I know you guys have your like development partnership with them. So for their like timed loot boxes, is that like work where you're buying a pack and then the cards that are within that pack are like shuffled around every so many hours? Is that basically the way it would work?
Exactly that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. because I guess like like I play a lot of card games myself, a lot of blockchain and non-blockchain card games. So it's always good like to be able to have that as a possibility, because you play something like Magic the Gathering and you end up getting cards that you don't need most of the time, and it can be frustrating. So I think that's a great idea and something good to bring into the blockchain side of things. Okay, so then I know one of the other ones that you guys brought up from the DApp side is the player trading. And I just wanted to get a little bit of background behind this. Is this like basically players within the game that you're supporting being able to trade like their NFTs and in-game items between each other?
So I think, to preface, we've got a number of DApps that we are in the process of building. I think there's going to be there's 10 that we've got planned off the top of my head.
Okay.
But we plan to definitely have, for games that want to support the particular DApp, have the in-game player-to-player transactions, but also facilitating a platform for P2P transactions outside of games as well is on the table.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions I had, was whether it would be whether you would use it as a way to securely move assets between different people, even if it wasn't within game. So that's great to hear that you guys will be doing that as well.
I do know there are a few solutions on Algorand that do already offer similar features, but a lot of them aren't very well known. There's been a few instances where someone sent me a link to a trade on a particular Algorand platform, and I wasn't sure if it was safe because it was not a platform that I've heard of before. So that's a big part of what we want to do, is know that when you're interacting with a Gradian platform, any platform that says powered by Gradian, you know you're in good hands, and you know that it's going to be a safe tool that you can use.
Yeah, and I think that like works out well with the fact that you guys are going to basically be helping out like a whole bunch of projects around Algorand, which develops that like trust with the community to make like a P2P trading app that you guys create usable by a lot of people. So that makes sense. Okay, so then I don't know if you want to talk about any of the other dApps that you're intending on developing. I know like 3 of the other ones that you brought up to me was like a player store, staking, and asset ownership. Like, I don't know if there's anything specific you wanted to bring up or talk about in regards to those.
We can definitely speak about them, but I think a few of them we'd like to keep a little bit under the table until further notice. There's a few projects that we're speaking with about some implementation, and until we've got specific approval from each project, I don't really want to go into much detail on the other ones.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly good. Like, I know we'll talk a little bit later about your partnership with Algo and exactly what that means and what you guys are doing for them. And if you want to talk about any other partnerships there, you can. If not, we completely understand. I know these things usually can't get spoken about until they're all settled out. I think just another question I had, talking about like all the dApps that you guys are creating in your SDK, like how exactly do you guys make revenue in regards to like creating these and making them available to the different games?
Sure. So in terms of revenue, we offer 2 different models. You can either use our API and SDK, where we literally give you our SDK package and you implement it yourself. And we take a very, very small microtransaction from the player each time they sign using our APIs. Or we can come in and our team can develop the game from scratch, from the ground up. And we charge a fixed fee to develop that title, and then a smaller API fee on top of that.
Okay, great. And I think that's a great one to lead into talking about Algo. So I know you guys announced a little while back that you had a partnership with them and you've been helping them develop their game. And I've seen some good teasers in your Discord and your Twitter. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that partnership, like how it came about and what exactly you guys are working with them on, or what you're doing for them?
Sure. So I think the way it came about is we really reached out to everyone that's looking to build a title on Algorand to see where we could build out. Initially, we wanted to see what tools we could provide to help. And it came to be that a lot of the teams didn't have enough developers to even build their own games. So even if we gave them the APIs and the SDKs, their games still weren't finished, or they were coming up with a few hurdles that just didn't allow them to have their dreams come to life. So very quickly, we realized that we had the capability to make their dreams come to life, whilst also providing us some revenue to continue to grow our team and to continue to put effort into our own developments. So sort of killing two birds with one stone. After having a chat with them, we realized that their title could be moved to more platforms to get them more players. We found a few tweaks that we could streamline, and we found a few new features that we could implement into their game to make it more fun, more enjoyable, and to really put the player first. But if Altaro wants to speak a little bit about exactly what we're developing and what that's going to look like, I think he's best fit to answer the rest of that.
Yeah, sorry, I was just putting up a demo of our time loot box to our Discord, which is actually linked in the comment section. So if you want to go and check that out, that'd be great. So to add to what Brandon said, yeah, so essentially they've got artistic talent but no dev talent, and they came to us with this idea and a very rough working prototype, which was missing a lot of the Web3, the hard stuff, the Web3 integration. And we've just been working on this game, and we've made a lot of progress, and we've been sharing updates to our Discord. As added to the comment section, you can see an update. And this has been, we're using a web stack for this, and we're accessing our APIs and our SDK, and it's helping us really just refine our dApps. And it's a chance to really put them to the test and work out any issues with them before they are made public to more people. And it's been great interacting with Algo team. We give them updates all the time, and it's just a great learning experience, and it's just been great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Like we took part in like one of their first ever testing sessions of their game and hold quite a few of their cards. So glad to see that you guys are helping them out and helping them improve the game even more. And we look forward to like what's to come from that. I don't know, do you guys want to talk about any other partnerships you have, or like all of them, the sort of things that you can't talk about yet?
I think there's one that I can go into a little bit of detail with. So we are speaking with a few other projects at the moment, and I think the next on the cards is going to be a slightly easier project, but I think something that I'm really excited for. And it's working with Darkcoin. Darkcoin wants to bring out their own 2D MMO RPG side-scroller game, which will allow you to use NFTs to power up your character, and then continue to upgrade those NFTs to become stronger and stronger within the game. It's going to be we want it to run on mobile as well. We know there aren't a lot of Web3 mobile games at the moment, but it seems like it's going to be a really exciting title, and is the only other one I can go into a little bit of detail about at the moment.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I know. Like there's probably a lot of opportunity to provide these sort of services, because I know there's a lot of even just NFT projects that are sort of looking for these services. I know the Borks are looking for a developer, which they posted about today, to help out with mini games and stuff like that, because their NFT project's been doing pretty well with some of the games that they currently have. And it seems to be like developing as a unique utility point for a lot of projects, and like obviously we're super happy to see that, because we're gamers at heart. So it's good that you guys are able to help out in that aspect, if some like the teams don't really have as many developer resources or experience. So that's great.
We also spend a lot of time fleshing out what these titles are going to look like. We've put together our own proprietary preparation document, which allows us to design UX UI mockups, actually flesh out what the microtransactions in this title will look like, how the player will progress, and what the game will look like. So we spend a lot of time really fleshing out these titles before we jump into them as well. And that's the stage that we're up to with Darkcoin, is fleshing out what this game is going to look like and how we can make it as fun as possible whilst implementing NFTs, but not forcing people to buy NFTs to play.
Yeah, that's great. I
One
assume it's super helpful for the projects that you guys get involved with as well, because I know like that's something that if you don't have a ton of experience fleshing that out up front, it can obviously be difficult and make things very difficult down the line, sort of thing.
Correct. One thing I'd noticed very early in Gradian's life is that a lot of the games that call themselves play to earn were actually play to win. So you would pay a small amount to play, and if you ranked in, say, the top 3, you would win a prize, which I don't think is play to earn. I think, in my opinion, play to earn is playing, and whether you win or lose, you still earn. And I think that's how all play to earn games should look to develop.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like at the moment it's kind of like the gaming or the blockchain gaming ecosystem across all chains seems to be sort of taking a bit of a shift, and I think a lot of it leads back to Axie Infinity's fall from, I guess they're still like whatever market cap, that's ridiculous, but like just the way that everything went with them, because the way they had set things up weren't super sustainable. So yeah, I agree with you that I agree with the concept of the fact that play to earn is like if you're playing that you're earning, rather than like if you take as example, like I play Splinterlands, the card game, and yes, I earn, I always earn, but if you play, but you're sort of earning amounts that are probably minuscule and not worth it. But yeah, that definitely makes sense to us. Okay, cool. So we spoke already about like how you guys earn revenue from these partnerships. So I think that should cover everything on the partnership side. One other thing just on partnerships, if anyone listening here is like a project or knows someone who needs some like development help, do they basically just DM you guys and then like set up a meeting?
Yeah, you can DM us. We also have a form that you can submit on Google Forms. You can flesh out some of the details to join our formal waitlist. But always happy to chat, even if we can't assist you right now. Always happy to brainstorm and see what value we can provide to your project. Or you can join our formal waitlist to use our API and SDK when the SDK package is released.
Great. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I know this is a bit on the back burner because of the like work you're doing for Algo and other projects, but I just wanted to talk a bit about Oracle, your game that you guys are developing, because the videos I've seen on YouTube and in your Discord look great. So I don't know if you want to just give a little bit of a background into like what is the type of game that you're developing, and like what once it's eventually released and available to players, what they can expect in game, and like just generally like what the gameplay experience will be like.
Atara, I think this is your passion project, so I think you should be best to address this.
Okay. So essentially, it's a showcase of our DApps, and it's going to let the players experience the metaverse with decentralized transactions that are enabled by our SDK. So the theme is it's kind of like Half-Life, in a setting that's in this dystopian future, and you can go in and you can interact in the metaverse with your avatar, which you can customize with NFT assets that which will sell in our marketplace, and it's kind of like Decentraland in some sense, and the player can earn by queuing for in-game mini games. For example, mini arena shooters where they can stake assets or be rewarded for their performance as ranked compared to other players. And that's kind of it in essence. It's being built in Unreal Engine, and we want to add Oculus support, and so it'll be like a VR experience. Yeah, that's kind of it, really.
Specifically on Oculus, we want it to run on Quest 2, which is the largest Oculus, the largest VR headset platform, and doesn't require a desktop computer with ridiculous processing power to run. It'll run native on Quest 2.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we have a Quest and love to use them without having to plug into the computer, because the first Oculus we got, everything had to be plugged in and had those stands with the sensors and everything. So yeah. Okay, so then that's great information about the game. So can you just talk a little bit about like what inspired you to develop like that sort of game and like the concept around the game, like what made you want to develop a game that's specifically like that?
Okay. Because so we have all these APIs, and we think the best way to put them to use, to demonstrate to potential clients, would be to have an open world experience where you have a need for all these transactions. And really, if it was too much of a specialized game, you wouldn't actually need all the APIs available, and you wouldn't be able to demonstrate all the APIs. So that's why it's kind of open world and open ended, which is much like the real world, and that lets us showcase all our APIs. We also were inspired by Decentraland, and we saw the success Decentraland was having with their title, and we figured we could put something similar together pretty quickly and go from there.
That sounds great. And then can you just talk about like how the development has been progressing with the game, and I know that you guys have put it on a bit of a back burner because of the other projects, but like, is there a goal on when you want to release it, or does it just depend on how much work you end up doing for projects on the Algo ecosystem?
Yeah, so you're right. It's definitely on the back burner because our clients take priority. It's more of a passion project, as Brandon mentioned, and we have made substantial progress. It just needs a bit of polish. And really, we're thinking of just releasing it in a working prototype state. And as we add to it, you'll see patches come through, and as we add our APIs, it'll just be integrated and demonstrated. So, in terms of a release timeframe, I think it's really hard to say because we have so many clients and only so much time. But I think maybe 2 to 3 months to have something that's decent and usable is realistic.
We have a working prototype of, I think it's been demoed a few times in our Discord and on Twitter, but we have a working prototype of a third-person shooter and a small open-world environment that you can run around in. So it is playable, it works. The devs have played it together. We just want to refine it so that it's fun, secure, and ready to release. Just a small amount of polish and it'll be ready to run.
That's great. Yeah, we look forward to trying it out. I guess I think that, oh, I know one of the parts, I know it spoke about there being, I think I read this on your website or in your Discord about there being like sort of mini games within Oracle that people will be able to play. Like what sort of mini games would there be, or is that something that you guys are still working on?
So one of the mini games is the third-person shooter, but really think of it as anything you could do in a carnival setting would be the sort of mini games we could put together. So think of the third-person shooter as laser tag. We could set up anything that's a skill-based game, whether that's a puzzle that you can solve to earn a reward daily from a digital faucet. You could play whack-a-mole, like literally anything that you could do in a carnival setting is what we'd want to build out throughout our game as mini games.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So I think we just have 2 more sections. One, I just wanted to talk a little bit about like the utility of your token. like basically just talking through like what the utility is now, and what utility you guys like expect to add into the future, whether that's through Oracle or the dApps that you guys are developing across the ecosystem.
So one of the utilities that we are implementing and working on is any title that uses Gradian as the APIs for their game. If you pay for those in-app transactions using Grad as a coin, or if you pay for the API fee section using Grad, you will get a discount through using Grad, which incentivizes players to hold Gradian and to use Gradian for their transactions. But I think Taro can go into a bit more detail on some of the other stuff we've got planned.
So the token, full disclaimer, it's purely a utility token, and its only purpose is to be used for exchange with in-game assets in-game, and also offers a 10% discount on any transaction fees. So if you hold Gradian, it'll be used in preference to other tokens to pay for transaction fees, and at a discount of 10%. So that incentivizes holding Gradian. And we are actually, it will also feature in Oracle as the medium of exchange. And we're still considering more utility to give the token. And really, it's just it's more, it's not really our focus, to be honest. The token is just something we made very early on, and our focus is really the smart contracts and working with clients to create GameFi-enabled games. Yeah, that's all I can really say about it.
Hypothetically, if Gradian was to release an NFT alongside of our token, there would be extra utility provided to our token in a hypothetical sense. But that will probably be for our next AMA.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I know another thing, and I don't know if you guys want to go into detail on this or not, but I know you have like other reward plans. I know one of them was like a Q&A farm. Can you just talk a little bit about what that is or what it's planned to be?
I'll let Brandon answer that one.
Could you go into a bit more detail on the Q&A farm?
Yeah. I know you guys spoke about like some sort of Q&A farm that would award tokens, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So because of the laws in Australia around gambling and charities and events, we are very hesitant to open up pools and farms that reward players for doing nothing, because it looks very much like what Australia classes as a managed investment scheme, which we absolutely are not, and we do not recommend that Gradian is used as an investment. However, if we open up a farm that requires players to pass a skill-based challenge, we can then issue a reward for passing said skill. So we have plans to put together, and this will be a demo of another one of our possible APIs and dApps, is a farm where you answer a simple question, whether it's 2 + 2 or it's a question about what is Gradian, in a very similar sense to the quiz and learning section on Coinbase, where you will be rewarded for answering very simple questions on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm glad to hear the US is not the only country that we have to skirt around all these ridiculous laws and rules. But yeah, that sounds like a great way of doing it. So I think the last question I had, and if anyone else who's on the space at the moment has any question they want to ask, just request to come up as speaker, like while we're talking through this last question, and we can end off. But I just wanted to just get a little bit of like, what do you guys see as your ultimate end goal or vision for Gradian in like 5 to 10 years?
I envision Gradian to be similar to, well, it really depends. The direction is changing every day based on what happens in the market, who we work with, and new ideas that we come up with. However, I see ourselves as a very similar platform to that of Immutable X, in that we're powering the next generation of Web3 games, but we're using a superior blockchain network. We actually put our games and our players first. We want to have lower fees than Immutable. We want to actually develop for the games and not just provide you with an SDK. We thoroughly enjoy the development cycle of putting together really exciting and fun to play games. Although it's a little bit cliche and everyone has the same dream, we want to be able to provide a Web3 metaverse. A vision that I have that is a little bit far-fetched at the moment would be to have every single title that we work with be integratable into our Oracle title or a similar Oracle title. So hypothetically, if you were to purchase an NFT from Algo that's usable inside the Algo game, also being able to use those NFTs inside of the Oracle game for some benefit, and have that be the same for any title that we work with. I'm a very big believer in interoperability, and I think that that is something that Web3 provides as a feature that isn't being utilized very heavily. And if we're developing for multiple games across the Algorand ecosystem, we're in the prime location to allow interoperability for our primary title.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And yeah, like I know I've always thought of like as an example, like Gala Games, like one of the biggest Web3 gaming companies, like them having interoperable NFTs between their titles, which would like sort of you buy an NFT from a title that you enjoy, and then you realize you can use it in other games. You try them out, and it sort of like spreads the love between the different games. So that sounds great. I know we have Jim from Aga Taxis. Jim, do you have a question?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good. So I had a question about your smart contracts, and I was wondering what language that you're using to develop your smart contracts in.
Hi, thanks for the question. So it's all Python at the moment. We were considering using Reach at one point, which has a lot of benefits, like compilation that that has program verification to check for common errors that can arise while writing smart contracts, and a close integration with the front end. But at the moment, we are actually just using Python, and we may consider using Reach in the future.
That's good to hear. The other question I had was with the timed loot boxes, and I was just curious if you could kind of maybe explain that a little bit more, because I don't really understand what the concept is. I haven't really played Fortnite, so I don't really know what that loot box system is like.
Sure. So it's just like a normal loot box. The only difference is the result. So your reward, once you've made the payment, is going to change every, say, 2 hours. And it's going to enumerate all the possible NFTs you could win from the loot box. And that's why it's called times, because, like, say, every 2 hours, your reward is going to change. And then once you're happy with your reward, you can claim it. And that removes any element of chance, if you think about it, technically speaking, which makes it a skills-based game and not a chance-based game, because you can see all the NFTs, in theory. If you wait long enough, you'll see all of them. So it's deterministic.
How does this work with, like, I can see it working with Fortnite where there's unlimited assets, but in the NFT world where there might be like a limited amount of assets, like with Algamond, they might have a certain amount of cards that go out. How does that work with time based if they run out of a set amount of card in a certain amount of time?
Okay, that's a good point. So say Algamond has about, I think, like 30 to 60 NFT cards. And so the first reward that you'll see is random. That's randomly chosen. And then say you'll have to wait 2 hours to see the next one, and it'll cycle through all the NFTs in a giant cycle. And you can make the time between the rotations infinitely long if you wanted to. You could make it, well, not infinitely long, but you could make it very long, so it's almost like a regular loot box. You can make it a week between rotations, and then no player is going to really wait a week to see all NFTs and to find the one they actually want. They'll just pick the first one and claim that reward. Yeah. So say you had 3 NFTs. It was a very small collection. Well, the first one would be random, and so most players would just take the random first result. And you could have a setting that's like a week between rotations. So they'd have to wait up to 3 weeks to see all NFTs enumerated, and they wouldn't do that. They'd just take the first result. Yeah.
I see. So it's basically like it is still random, but the enumeration is it's hard to determine because of the time duration.
Correct. And hypothetically, if you had infinite time, you would see all of the cards in an infinite amount of time. Therefore, it's not a random game of chance. It's a game of time and waiting.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So my next question. So we're actually we've actually, or I should say, I've developed our own loot box system. It's not as sophisticated as yours, and I was curious with your loot box system. Is it actually done? Is the code done? Are projects able to reach out to you and have it part of their next drop, or what's the status of it?
It's done. So pending a code audit. So it's had a very like a first pass code audit. It just needs another one to really make it secure. And it is functional. You can use it right now if you want to. And it's being added to Algamond as we speak. And so that's all user interface work that needs to be done to connect with our backend in the smart contract. And I've actually linked in the comments section, you can see a link to a Discord message which contains a demo of this smart contract. You can see the smart contract history along with the bytecode, and you can view it. Yeah, and we've taken a lot of things into consideration. Like, for example, the assets that you can potentially win must be specified in the foreign assets array. So when the user submits a buy transaction to buy the loot box, they have to specify all the NFTs they can actually win in the foreign assets array field of the transaction when they create it. And this is a potential security issue because they could actually just specify one asset, and that could be the asset they'll get because there's only one to choose from. So what we've done is we've added a hash. When you create the smart contract, you have to specify all the assets it's going to possibly reward the player with. And what we'll do is we'll take a hash of this array of assets, install this hash as a global variable on creation that is immutable. And when a buyer comes in and they say, oh, hey, this is the range of assets that I can potentially win, it will take the hash of this foreign asset and compare it to the hash of that's stored. And if they're the same, that means that they're definitely providing all the assets. So that's just an example of one of the security features we've got. There's lots of things going on to prevent fraud. Yeah.
Also, I had a personal question for you. At Wargaming, which projects did you work on? It sounds like you guys have a good background.
So, okay, there is only so much I can say to avoid violating an NDA that I signed. All I can say is, which is available online, is I was working on the replays team on a Western title, a title that's more geared towards a Western audience, which is similar to, which is an arena shooter, which is like there are other titles like World of Tanks and World of Warships, but it's more more for MOBA and more geared towards a Western audience as opposed to an Eastern audience of mainly like Russian users. It's more like League of Legends, and that's all I can really say. And I was working on the replays team, which were tasked with integrating match replays. So when you play a match, it gets stored somewhere, and after the game, you can go and replay it to review your gameplay. And you can scrub the timeline and do stuff like this. And that's all I can really say about that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Great, thanks for the question, Jim. Okay, guys, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the AMA, which has been great and super insightful. Before we end everything, is there anything else you want to say to the community? And then we can wrap things up.
I
Yeah.
want to.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just say there's one thing. Sorry, I'm stuttering. There's one thing I wanted to clarify, which is regarding a question that a user posted earlier, and that was about why do our transactions get sent from our backend. So not only is that because we have server transactions that need to get added to the group transaction for user signing in the front end. We also have basic client. So it's all we need to link the clients, the apps somehow. So they can go to our admin dashboard where they can create all these DApps, and these are all identified by their client ID, and they need to specify this in the front end. So the front end knows what collections of DApps they own and they've configured in the dashboard. So really, the back end is like a linking between the developers or the clients DApps that they've made in our dashboard and the front end where they can actually use them. And it's all connected through a client ID. So if you've ever used an API before, you know there's like a client ID that you can copy from a website where you configure your API, and you just paste it into the front end somewhere, and you can link up to your back end through this client ID. That's essentially it. So that's why we need a back end, and yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Brandon, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I really just wanted to thank you for having us here, and I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. Thank everyone for supporting us and standing by us through everything. I know we've changed directions a few times, but that's only because new and better things keep coming our way. We get a lot of feedback from the community, and the feedback that we get is invaluable. I really respect the Algo community and really thank everyone for all the support we've had since we've come into this community.